Hey, Habit Thrivers. If you're ready to rock your next chapter, this is your place. It's time to live your most fit, fearless, and fabulous life. I believe that our daily habits and routines set the foundation for achieving our dream lives and help us find more passion and clarity with less doubt and uncertainty. So let's get cozy. Grab your planner and your favorite beverage and come along with me on this journey of reclaiming your passions and finding new ones along the way. Welcome to the Habit Thrive podcast, a podcast for women in their me now years. Hi, I'm Lori, your host, and I am so glad that you're here. Today, I'm sharing an inspiring and thought-provoking interview with Lorene Sauro, an award-winning holistic nutritionist, speaker, writer, and researcher who specializes in upgrading our understanding of microbiomes and hormone health. Lorene is known for her ability to read and interpret the research and, more importantly, translate it into practical, usable solutions that help her fellow practitioners support their clients with more confidence. With a BA from the University of Waterloo and substantial culinary training, Lorene brings both science and soul to the world of food and wellness. What I love most about this conversation today is how deeply we dive into our relationship with food, especially during this chapter of our lives, when we finally have more time and wisdom to question, explore, and reconnect with how food truly nourishes and satisfies us. Let me ask you this though. Are you a little tired of talking about all the foods you shouldn't eat? I know I am. In fact, I've caught myself doing just that in past episodes, labeling and eliminating foods. Lorene has already helped to shift this focus for me in such a powerful way. So in today's discussion, we explore, number one, why we might be eliminating entire food groups based on fads or fear, Instagram or TikTok, and how that affects our joy and nutrient intake. Number two, how our awareness during eating, taste, texture, satisfaction can transform our relationship with food. And number three, how so many nutrition studies miss the real big picture. We don't eat food in isolation. It's in the combinations, the context, and our unique biology that matters. We also touch on how modern life has left many of us confused about our body's own cues, like hunger, fullness, and energy, and how tuning back in can be so healing. My hope is that this episode invites you to ask more questions, not just of your healthcare team, but of yourself. It might encourage you to journal a little more, to explore a little more, to just stay curious. So if you're ready, let's dive into this rich and empowering conversation with Lorene Sauro. Welcome, Lorene, to the Habit Thrive podcast. I am so excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I think we're going to have a good conversation, and that's always fun.
Well, absolutely, because we have a little bit of history for those of you who are listening and you were part of my 2020 summit at the very beginning of COVID, actually, where I paused for a moment when we came into that and thought, I think it's going to be too challenging to do a big summit on habits and healthy habits. And it ended up being actually the perfect timing. And it was in July of 2020. And some of you will remember my interview with Lorene. And I remember for lots of reasons, but I had a number of you just reach out after. And my listeners, I have to tell you, Lorene, and during the summit, were just so impressed. And so it's been a couple of years, and I have been following Lorene. I've been following her blogs and what she's been sharing with her followers over the last couple of years. And it just is really, really connecting with what we've all been doing together here on the Habit Thrive podcast. And I have to share one particular, there were lots of highlights from our interview in 2020, but one of them was a comment you made, Lorene, around emotional eating. And I remember we were talking about it and you made a statement around, of course, from a positive perspective, not from a negative perspective about emotional eating, but your comment was, of course, we eat with our emotions. Like we should be eating. It should be an emotional relationship. And you said like this negativity around emotional eating, and that has stuck with me ever since you said that. And I can't even tell you how often it just kind of pops into my head. So the title of today's podcast is From Restriction to Rhythm, Nourishing Your Body and Mind in Your Me Now Years. And I have a feeling that's just going to thread itself through as we move through the questions. And it was quite challenging, actually, to narrow down questions for Lorene, but I tried to do it. And before we dive into the questions, Lorene, can you share with our listeners here your journey, how you've actually been working on finding your rhythm through holistic nutrition over the last few years, how you've come to supporting health practitioners, and I'd like to say like everyday women like myself and people in general actually around holistic nutrition that's brought you here to you and I chatting again here today.
Well, a number of years ago, we're talking 25 plus years, I suffered from endometriosis and early osteoarthritis. And that led me to go to the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, where I became a holistic nutritionist. And then from there, I decided I wanted to be in the profession. I'd been a baker and I had a bakery for a number of years, and I decided I wanted to be in the profession. So that led me to teaching at the school, then developing my own programs for my colleagues and working with clients. And, I come from the food industry, so I did some work in the food industry, developing recipes. And, I've done a whole gamut of things, but my main goal was to solve my own health issues. And that's not an uncommon story amongst many of my colleagues. And it stems from when you go through the medical system, you often don't get answers to your questions because you're asking things they didn't think of.
Right.
They're more concerned with the immediate needs that your body might have, as opposed to what you think of long term. And, if I fast forward that, 20 plus years, I resolved my endometriosis in the early 2000s, but in 2023, turns out I had a big, large tumor growing out of my ovary, which I know I've had since at least 2015. And I was very fortunate. It never metastasized, so it was a simple removal. And of course, when if you know anything about the medical process, they just don't take the tumor. No. Full hysterectomy, full oophorectomy. And it goes back to what I just said, left me with questions that I can't get answers for. So now that I know more about how the body works, I'm curious to know, what does such an invasive procedure mean for the overall function of the body ongoing? And I know, when I came out of the hospital, I went into a respite home for 2 months. And of course, it's in a retirement home. So I met all these amazing 90-year-old plus women. Yeah. Like some are 98, some are like amazing. And I swear to God, every single one of them said they'd had a hysterectomy. So I don't think it's a longevity issue. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So, but all of this has left me, I research things, I read things, I ask questions. I'm always surprised how often I can ask a medical professional, a doctor, a naturopath, whoever, a question, they can't answer it. And I don't mean it like they've never thought of it. Like, it's like,
exactly.
If I've had $1 for every time a medical professional says, that's a really good question, I don't know about that. And I'm like, I could be in Tahiti right now if you'd pay me $1 right now. I could go on vacation because it's two different mindsets. Yeah. It's two different perspectives. I'm about living my life. They're about making sure I don't die. Right?
I had never thought about that. Yes.
It is. Once the acute problem is over, they're done with you. They're like, okay, go on your way. And you're like, but I feel this twinge here, or, you took this out. What does that mean? Well, we don't really know. It seems to not kill people, so you're good to go. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Wow. And with more, as you say, like curiosity, more questions and answers.
I mean, and statistically, and this is not going to be just me, but a lot of people would find that when they start, say, going online and reading in chat groups or whatever, articles written about a certain topic that you've been through, that a lot of times you don't fit the model they're talking about, right? So I don't really, I sort of fit the cancer model because it was a tumor, but I don't fit what a lot of women or men go through with the chemo and the radiation, which is what most people associate with the cancer story and the most debilitating part of it, right? But I also had to have a temporary ileostomy because the tumor had damaged my colon. I don't want to even go into that, but the bottom line is if I'm looking for information on getting that reversed and recovery for that, the only thing that's out there is people who had colon cancer or colitis or Crohn's, and that's not me either. Like, it's just, you just don't necessarily fit, and therefore where do you go for information? And when I talk to doctors about it, they don't know either. They don't know anything about it. But you performed it on me. Like, you don't know anything about it. But anyway, so it leaves you in a position, and this is how I've felt since I started nutrition school, of going on my own journey.
Okay.
And finding out what works best for me and not getting caught up in, there's a lot of information about people telling you what you should or shouldn't eat or do or shouldn't do, and making it more about what I would like to do, what I want to do, what I enjoy. That is much more of a focus for me than trying to find this perfect way of eating or this perfect way of living or, believing in a lot of things that are going to cause me harm. I'm like, maybe they will, maybe they won't. At some point you have to just go, you know what, like, let's just live life, right? Like,
yeah. And it sounds like when some of the discussions, there's just so much that you highlighted there that my brain is, going through the years of, and the range really, as we're talking now, well, myself included, this range of 45 to, or 35, I'm going to say 35 now to 90, with everything happening for women in that huge span of time. And speaking to women at that age, and I was saying just actually last week talking about 70s and 80s and, and then you're talking about 90s now, as well as still dealing with, I don't know if the word is dealing with, but experiencing, right? And perhaps becoming more aware of the symptoms in our body that are related to, well, yes, I mean, they're related to aging, but they're also related to surgeries that we've had and our hormone experience, whether we had hormone replacement or didn't, and where we are on the spectrum. And you just really hit it on the nail for me right now, being at 59 and asking, it seems like the more questions that I'm asking, and everyone who's listening, Lorene and I had spoken just a little while ago about the benefits actually of AI right now in terms of research. So being able to get into different research sites that we would not have been able to, right, access this information even just a few years ago, or maybe just even a couple of years ago. And you sound like you're like me, where it's like, okay, that just makes me ask more questions.
I am a big ChatGPT fan, although I'm not going to say that's the best source for research. But there's actually another one, Perplexity, which actually can get you better content from a research perspective. But to have a conversation with basically someone, even though it's not a someone, but someone who has access to the entire internet to come up with their perspective, is actually quite helpful. And have I caught it in mistakes? Of course I have. Yes. Have I corrected it? Yes, I have. And then it says, oh, you're absolutely right. It does say that to me.
Yes.
But it's really made it simpler, like I asked it, what is the recovery time from, I gave him my parameters of this reversed ileostomy. I said, what are the recovery time? And it said 1 to 2 years. I wasn't told 1 to 2 years. I wasn't told anything.
Yeah.
They're like, bye, see you. You're sewn up now. Have a nice life. If you have any pain, let us know. what kind of pain? What's your definition of pain? Like, do I have to be doubled over? What if it's a twinge? So it's stuff like that. And I have found, again, you got to take it. You got to push it and test it to make sure you're not. And it can mislead and it can make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And it does have its own personality and can get, apparently it's suffering from PTSD. A friend of mine sent me an article about that because people are so rude to it. And I'm like, well, at least I'd say please. I'd say please.
I do too. I think that's, it's actually hard to stop. It's hard to stop. Like even for a moment, if you were to laugh and you were asking like ChatGPT for, I would ask simple questions like, why can't I take, hormone replacement when I'm 15 years post-menopause? Simple, like you would think a simple question, but there is no simple answer to that. So then I just keep asking and asking and asking, and it brings you to more articles and articles and articles. And at the end right now, I'm still in the research process on that, but at least I feel like I am educating myself more for sure. And I still work, health practitioners. And as you mentioned that, we're kind of a lot of us, and it depends on where you are in the research and where you are, I guess, as a practitioner or physician. But some of that information, again, a lot of it is overwhelming. So having all of the information is one thing. Going through it and figuring out, okay, as you mentioned, is this true? And I have done that with ChatGPT before. This doesn't seem accurate. Are you sure? I've actually said that. Are you sure? And then it will come back to me and say, you're absolutely right. No, I don't think that's right. And I'm like... So it's really interesting, but it is a little bit, the word's not scary, but just like, wow. It kind of gets you kind of goosebumpy sometimes. But I am on the side of really embracing and not being afraid of the opportunities that are coming for us to become more informed, as long as we keep doing, as you say, keep asking for clarification. Once I have information, then I'm checking in with my health practitioners. And what do you think of this? And it's quite exciting. And for where we are in this chapter of our lives, and 50 is a pretty arbitrary number, but that is what I say on my podcast for women 50 and beyond. But circling back around to, okay, there are still a lot of unanswered questions, and I can go down deep like yourself, down those rabbit holes. And then I'm back around to going, I just want to sit down and have a snack here before my nap.
My favorite thing to do, snack and nap. Yep. I do like to have a little time between the nap and the snack. That's beside the point. I do have a piece of information for you. You can take this for what it's worth, because you said something about you were looking for information about a woman taking HRT after 15 years past menopause. And why can't she? Okay. I did what's called a wet urine hormone test. It's different from a dried urine. If you're familiar with a Dutch test, it's a dried urine. The wet urine is supposed to be more accurate. So I did the test. And again, it's done through, I have an account with the company because I'm a practitioner, but it's done through it's an alternative kind of test, just like the Dutch test or the saliva hormone test. And I did a saliva hormone cortisol test at the same time. Anyway, I also got my doctor to run a blood test because I wanted to see and I've done this in the past, I just wanted to see the difference. So when hormones are in the blood, they're bound. So they're not really reflective of what your active hormones are doing, whereas urine is better for that. Anyway, so I get the results and it says I'm low. And then I get my blood test result back and it says I'm normal for my age. Okay. And so I'm confused. So the company that runs the wet urine puts me in touch with a doctor who will give me a 30-minute consultation to discuss this. And one of the things he said was, because this was the only thing that he said that was even interesting and useful, was that they have found, and I don't know if it's true, I haven't gone to look to find the research, but they have found that past a certain point, a menopausal female will not benefit from hormone replacement therapy. I don't know how they measure it. I don't know how they determined that. I'll have to go looking further, but I thought that was very interesting because I was thinking about it. Right. If these were really low. What I didn't like about his consultation was that he kept saying, I'm like, but it says I'm low. Oh, but you're low but you should be lower because of your age. And I'm like, but they knew my age. So I have to go back to the persons who run the company who I know.
Right.
And I'm going to ask them, is that your take on it? Because you created this test, right? So is that true? Then it shouldn't say I'm low. It should say I'm normal. So I think he's wrong on that. But I'm being a little less worried about it, because if my blood hormones are low or normal, at least I'm making the right amount.
Okay. Yeah.
So my concern was, okay, so when you go through menopause, the ovaries stop making estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, supposedly. I have read that that's not the case, that there's still small amounts being made of estrogen, virtually no progesterone, virtually no testosterone. And then the adrenal glands are the ones that are responsible for producing, and fat tissue, I should say, some adipose tissue, your estrogen. The adrenals are responsible for the testosterone and the progesterone. I think the fat tissues can also do some testosterone too. So I was wondering, since they pulled out all my parts, am I now at risk of being low estrogen? Estrogen is really critical as you get older because it helps with other functions throughout the body. It isn't about reproduction anymore. It's about physical function.
Yes.
And so I said that to him, and his response was, oh, no, that's not true about the ovaries. Once they're done, they're done. And I'm like, I think you're wrong. I didn't say that to him, but I'm thinking, I think you're wrong. Nonetheless, if my blood hormone levels are normal, then all I have to figure out if I'm not utilizing it, or if I can unbound them. So that's so now I will be researching. I know phytoestrogens help you like ground flax seeds, for example, help you unbind them. Yes. There's things that you can take. So I'll be investigating that. But it just shows you that even talking to a medical professional, that you don't know how accurate their information is. You don't know how much they've kept up to date. You don't know if they're dealing with 20-year-old information or yesterday's information. And I don't know about you, I want yesterday's information.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's not that many things have changed that 20-year-old information isn't good, but if it's 20-year-old information and it's still good today, it'll still be good yesterday, right? So this is a big problem we have right now, and I think we've grown up to this idea, if we're just looking at how medical professionals have learned how the body functions, how it's been studied. I think we're in an age now where that study has been short-sighted. A big example is the gut microbiome. They gave it no countenance for how many years?
Right. Yes.
And now today, it's everything. It's involved with every function in your body. So they wasted a lot of time not studying it. We'd be so much further ahead. The bulk of the research on it started in 2014, like when it just exploded with research studies. Other than that, there was hardly any over the years.
That's astounding.
It's very astounding. So that's just one area. They keep finding body parts they didn't know we had. They keep finding new functions for the ones we do have. They're like,
it is so true. Even fascia, like back, I don't know, like early 1900s in the anatomy lab, they would just like strip the fascia off the muscles and say, like, what is this webbing, and get rid of it so that they could look at the muscles, because those were the important parts. And now they're like, fascia is like everything. It is the interconnection. It is innervated. It is the casing of our entire body. It's fascinating, but it's still kind of shocking, as you say. Like, there's just so much more to learn. And now we're going to be, I'm not sure it'll be interesting, because we're going to be questioning. I'm just finding that we are questioning more in general, just having this discussion, for example, you and I. And there's nothing, that place we get to where and there's so many questions and not many answers. But I just think we're at that point that there's still going to be so many more questions. And to be at that place right now in our wisdom years, in our next chapter years, and in the place that we are right now. And, you spoke to the gut biome and speaking to hormone and everything like fascia and gut, microbiome and hormones. I mean, right? It's still all related. It's like we are integrated sources of magnificence. So if we circle back around to foods, you mentioned, flax seeds. I just read phytoestrogens. We were talking about, right, hormones. This is where I get a little overwhelmed sometimes. I'm like, should I be, having my tempeh and my flax seeds and my edamame, or am I going for my liver, function, like giving nice support for my liver, or I'm trying to get the antioxidants in? And how's that for a question, Lorene?
Great question. So first of all, yes to the phytoestrogens. And second, there are 6 different types of phytoestrogens, and there are so many foods. If you're eating a whole food diet, you're getting them. Okay. So don't think you have to stick with soy or flax seeds. There's other foods that have these phytoestrogens. Are they as high as in soy or flax seeds? Maybe not. I don't really know. I'd have to look it up, but it doesn't really matter if you're eating a whole food diet and you're getting some of them all over the place. That makes more sense because you're getting a whole bunch of other things at the same time than focusing. Remember, they're going to study soy by itself. They're going to study flax seeds by itself. So whatever they find isn't really relevant to a whole food diet and what would happen if you had other phytonutrients from other sources. So that's the good news. I wouldn't worry about your tempeh unless you want it. The second thing is, we talk about what they missed with the microbiome and with the fascia, but they did the same thing with food where they narrowed it down to fats, proteins, carbs, vitamins and minerals. And then maybe a few years later, they brought in fiber. They actually noticed that the fiber actually had a purpose.
Yes.
But a lot of the foods that were created, especially for the fast food industry or the processed refined foods industry, that's what they were, right? They were just the carbs, the fats, and the protein, and everything had been stripped out of them. And then they started adding in synthetic vitamins and minerals to make it better, right? Yeah. Which, again, do we want synthetic vitamins? And what they left out and what they didn't understand is that there's these hundreds of chemicals in a whole food. We call them phytonutrients or phytochemicals, and they have so many, or antioxidants, if you want to call them that too, because most of them are, a lot of them are. And they have such incredible benefits for us that to have left them out of the story is ridiculous. So it kind of makes most nutrition science going back 20, 30 years kind of irrelevant. Now, nutrition science is catching up because they are researching these phytonutrients, but they're still not telling the whole story. So when they study a food, well, let me put it this way. They don't study a food. Okay. They study a chemical in the food. So when they find that a phytochemical given to a rat or a petri dish, or sometimes it's a human study, we'll look at resveratrol in red wine, for example. Right. Okay. Yeah. They can find it has some benefits, and then they talk about that. But if they find it has something, because usually they do more than you could possibly consume, if they find any kind of negative thing, then they say that too, and then they apply that to the food, and like the food is bad, and the food's not bad at all. Okay, gotcha. Okay. And then there's the other aspect. And so I'll take saturated fat as a really good example. First of all, there aren't really any good studies on saturated fat, just telling you that. So when you look at fat and you look at saturated fat, what's saturated fat? Where did the saturated fat come from? Like animal fat. Well, how was the animal raised? So we know that animals that are raised a certain way have more nutrients in their body and therefore their fat than those that don't. And a lot of those are antioxidants. I know the first time I heard a phytonutrient being found in animals, I'm like, but phyto means plant. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, what they have found is that cows, for example, or whether they're beef cattle or dairy cattle, but it's easier to research dairy cattle, they find that because they eat grass, And if they get the right grass and the right cross section of nutrients, because they're not eating a single type of grass,
Right.
which when you pasture feed that, they're getting different types of grasses and stuff, they actually find phytonutrients from the grass in their liver.
Nice.
They find phytonutrients from the grass in their milk. And this is what, if you ever heard the term regenerative agriculture?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what it's all about. That's what regenerative agriculture is about, regenerating the soil and the land and how you farm it. And one of the things, and it has a lot of implications for plants and how you grow vegetables and fruits and stuff, but it also has huge applications for raising of animals and pasture, like letting them out to pasture like they would in a natural environment, and what it means nutritionally. And they've also found, and I know we're going a bit off topic here, that when you do this, they're so far, you know how they always blame the cows for the carbon footprint stuff, right?
Yes, yeah.
They actually help sequester carbon out of the atmosphere, and the way they tug on the grass, like what they have found out about when things are done the way nature intended them to be, there's not the problems that they are assigning to different things. So that could be food, it could be, animal foods or animals, or it could be us, or it could be, whatever. So that's a huge topic. Food, and this is the part that bothers me the most, and this goes back to the joy of food.
Okay.
When they start talking about what is a good food and what is a bad food, what saturated fat can do or what it can't do, or, what broccoli is good for and what broccoli isn't good for, because don't even get me started on that. Broccoli's great for everything. Anyway, they don't talk about what happens when you put a food together with other ingredients to create a recipe, and then put that recipe together to create a meal. So they never talk about the synergy of the ingredients going together. So for example, when you look at saturated fat and you feed a ton of it to a rat and then make a conclusion about saturated fat, well, that's not how we eat saturated fat. First of all, if we're eating any saturated fat, like butter, or we're eating a piece of meat or coconut or whatever, there's other fats in there that are not saturated. So pork lard has, 40% monounsaturated.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Who knew?
Who knew? That's why donuts fried in lard taste so good. No. Anyway, and I'd like to say I have a lot of experience with donuts fried in lard, but no, not in our world, unfortunately. Those are from times gone by. I had a Polish pastry chef many, many years ago. That's what he told me. He said, the best donuts are fried in lard. And Krispy Kreme?
Oh,
fried in lard. That's why they became so, okay, it's a big success. But anyway.
Yes.
But when you look at saturated fat or anything, fat in general, carbs,
yeah.
The negative about carbs, when you put them together with other nutrients that are in a meal, it changes the relationship of how those nutrients, the carbs, the fats, the proteins, the vitamins, the minerals, and all those phytonutrients, it changes the relationship of how they're going to affect your body. And for me, if I was going to pick something I was going to use as a sort of a broad stick for my own eating benefit, I would choose how I feel after I eat the food, taking into consideration the flavor, because when you take in the flavor, we've got 5 different taste receptor types on our tongues. We got sour, sweet, umami, bitter, and salty, right?
Yes.
Those are all sending signals all over the place, especially up to your brain. And this is where the emotions come in. So the reason you get an emotional positivity from a given food, it's multifactorial. It's not just the nutrients in the food. It's also the surroundings when you eat the food, like your mother made it for you, right? Mm-hmm. Or, it's something you have a very positive association with. All of this is because the flavors and the environment in which you eat are sending signals up to the brain, and you're creating a memory of that food in the emotional center of your brain. So therefore, you're always going to have this emotional center dictating what you like and what you don't like. And our goal is to see food as its own journey and pick it based on what our physical body is saying to us, right? Saying, I'm hungry, I need certain things. Your body will talk to you if you listen to it. I said that to somebody once, and they said I thought I was nuts, and then they started listening and found out I wasn't. No, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to go, oh, please give me a hamburger right now. Okay. No, you might crave a hamburger. That's your body talking to you.
Yes.
Why is your body craving a hamburger? Well, you clearly want the tastes. You're picturing the tastes, right? And those tastes are connected to a memory that's positive. And so you want it. And since you're hungry, it makes a good choice, right? And you can have a healthy hamburger, I'm just saying, but so we're not going to demonize the hamburger. There's all kinds of ways to make the food better.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, put more nutrients in them, still have those flavor tastes. And then we have to ask ourselves, what are the tastes that we like? So we have primary tastes, which I just mentioned, the sweet, salty, you want whatever. Umami doesn't actually taste good at all, but
yeah,
sugar does. Salt to a degree does. But anyway, when you mix them, you get a different flavor profile. And so how do you then adjust your palate with foods that maybe are new to you, taking flavors that you like and mixing them together in order to enjoy it? And then you have secondary tastes. So secondary tastes are the phytonutrients flavor. So why a blueberry tastes like a blueberry is because of its phytonutrients.
Yes.
Otherwise, if the they often put the phytonutrients into a category, call them bioflavonoids or polyphenols, or, they throw these words around. But why does one polyphenol taste different than another polyphenol if they have the same benefits? Well, it's because they're not the same polyphenol. They are the blueberries polyphenols, and they're the strawberries polyphenols, and that's the flavor profile. So then all you have to do is put the flavors that you like into the foods that you now think you should be eating because they're, they have more nutrients or whatever.
Yes.
So that it tastes like something you're familiar with. And it has, I say, if you want, put ketchup on your, your quinoa, bowl with avocado. If that's how your palate wants. It's not what my palate would want, but and you can get good quality organic ketchup too. I'm just saying. Yeah. You can find beautiful mustards. You can find different condiments and things. There's herbs, there's spices, there's so many things you can put into something that makes it taste really good to you. And all of a sudden now you're getting an emotional connection to that food that'll make you want to eat that now as much of whatever it was that you wanted to eat in the past from an emotional perspective.
I love that. For me, it just checks off so many boxes of enjoyment. I love food. There's not many foods, let's say, that are there are some that are off my list, but I do remember that from our discussion again a few years ago, where it's not about the food, it's about your gut sometimes, right? Or often. And so I would come back to go, okay, so I'm just going to remove this for a little bit. Or, as you have me thinking about today, maybe not having it on its own, maybe combining it with something else and being open to the possibilities of maybe enjoying that food. I've had some interesting sensitivities in the last little while this interview, this chat is so timely right now. And it's timely going into whenever you're listening. Some people will be listening to this podcast like in November or January, but we're recording it here in April, moving into a time of the year that is clearing and cleansing, and we're heading towards, lighter foods. We're excited. You mentioned, spices and herbs. I've just had on my counter yesterday, I have not in my garden or seed, but just like cilantro and dill and parsley and mason jars. I'm just getting excited for this. But I'm hoping that, and this is the way I'm feeling right now, this is why this is so timely, that it is a reset time. And that when you notice how you feel when you're eating certain foods, and it doesn't have to be right now this time of year, but this is where I'm a little bit, over the last few years, I've been a little bit more connected with how I'm feeling now going into the spring. I'm noticing that I don't want to make a big pot of, it's nothing wrong if someone wants to make a big pot of chili. It's actually snowing out right now, to tell you the truth. I can't. Oh, yes. Yeah, we're both
not here.
We're
snowing here.
Yeah, listeners, we're Canadian here, both of us, but Lorene's a little further south than I am here. So yes, literally, I'm looking out the window and it is snowing, but I still have my herbs like up on the counter because that is the switch that my brain is making right now, and that is connection and relationship. And if you can take that opportunity now when you're listening to this podcast episode to think about that. What is your emotional connection to the food? How can you combine it? What do you have a real, like, I can't eat, I don't eat that, I can't eat that. And it might have been a negative experience. And then sometimes, right, you said this before, well, then just let it go then. But not because the food is bad. I remember that you saying, not because you're saying that food is good and that food is bad. That food right now, and it's in the present situation right now, is perhaps not working for you. So I love that new way of looking at things, because the good and the bad food, like carbs are bad and protein is, that's like piles of grams of this. And in that combination, in that relationship, how are you feeling? And so often and that's where we're listening to the experts or the Instagram or the TikToks or all of this that are telling us, oh, you're going to have so much energy. And then you have a whole bunch of that food and like your stomach hurts and you can't sleep and you're like, but they said this reminder that you're sharing with all of us to come back to mindfulness, come back to awareness, come back to food combining, come back to the joy of your food again. Particularly, if you're listening and you're 20 years old, like party on, you've got so many years now again. And you are like, if you're watching TikTok and that you're 20, 30 years old, I can't imagine what you're getting hit with right now as well in your social media. But all of us right now, it's a stressful time right now where we are listening to this in April 2025. And so this is coming into it. But as you're saying, like, come on back, everybody. Come back to some of your key. And that's a ritual. When I talk about habits, routines, and rituals, I love thinking about that relationship with food as being what is, a ritual. What is your morning ritual around food and around, for me, it's like we're getting close to 3:00 and it's like my snack time is my ginger snap, right? And my cup of tea. And so connecting to those rituals again and taking the opportunity right now as we're moving into every season is also a chance to reset, is the way I like to look at it too. So this is just perfect timing. Lorene, is there anything else that you'd like to share? And definitely share where our listeners can receive your amazing blogs and information and all of that. So
okay, well, just one more thing I wanted to say, because you mentioned food sensitivities, right? And we live in an era where there's people running around making lots of money saying those foods are the problem when really it's the gut. You mentioned that. So I want them to really focus on that. Those things can change within reason, where if you focus on gut health, remember that the reason you have the sensitivity is you don't have enough of the specific strains of bacteria that digest that food. That's what's going on. And that's a big, simple statement for a really complicated situation going on in your intestines. Okay. So, but the goal then is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, not to demonize that food. Work on your gut health. See if you can, and you can use that food as a test, right? So as your gut health gets better, you can eat the food. And if you don't have the same reaction, you're getting progress, right? And maybe you eat the food and then you're good. And then you start eating it all the time like you used to, and you start to get symptoms. You're like, oh, okay, I'm not done yet, but right. I can at least eat it, once every 2 weeks, or I can eat it on occasions or whatever. And you're learning about what your body likes and doesn't like, and you're learning about what's going on in your gut. The goal here is have the food, eat the food. Don't demonize the food. Now, if you have to avoid that food in the short term, you avoid that food. Why make yourself uncomfortable? So that's kind of a big takeaway, because that's a big thing right now. There's a really big movement of practitioners demonizing really good foods, dairy, gluten, tomatoes, the list goes on and on. I've not seen a food that hasn't been on that hit list by some doctor somewhere, and they don't know what they're talking about. And they're just guessing. And if this dog barks again, he's going to be in trouble. I don't know if you heard him bark. Did you hear him bark?
I did not hear. No, I didn't hear your dog
Somebody's
barking.
coming home, and so he gets all excited. See, that's a Zoom thing, right? That
Yes.
it blocks out the other. That's really a handy thing that Zoom does.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's what I would. Because I'm like, don't do it again. Yeah, no, that's what I would think people should take away from this, is that there are answers for whatever problems you have. We may have them. We may have part of the answer, but it's worth pursuing depending on what joy you're going to get from finding the answer. So if that's going to give you foods that you really, really enjoy, and it's going to change your eating experience, so it's a sense of joy, then it's worth pursuing the answers and not. I just feel so bad. I've met many of them, people who live kind of like as prisoners to their body because they have trouble eating different foods, or they have trouble with different health issues and such. So that's the goal. There's an answer out there somewhere.
That's beautiful.
In terms of where people can find me, my blog is on Substack. Just go to sauro.substack.com and you'll find it. I put one out every week. I'm going to start trying to doing some podcasts. I did a few back at last spring. Then I fell off the wagon. So mainly I just write the blog right now, but it's my joy and I really enjoy it. And I pick all kinds of weird different topics, all centered around food. And as I said to somebody last week, and I can always make a gut connection with each and every topic. I can always connect it to the gut. But just sort of, blowing up some of the myths and trying to have it's called a better conversation. Mind you, I might be changing the name. But anyway, it'll always be found at sauro.substack.com. So.
Nice. Yes. And I have to shout out I look forward to receiving and reading your blog entries every week. Always enlightening. And there are, I'm going to say, few emails that I read every week, and or every time it comes into my inbox. So everyone listening, I'm giving a big shout out for those blog entries. And Lorene, I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your passion, just years and years of experience, and your very common sense and calm approach that we need so much, not just again at this time of just overwhelm in terms of the food industry, but just overwhelm just right now in our atmosphere, I'm going to say. So this was perfect timing. And I thank you so much. And everybody, again, listening, I will have the information in the show notes so that you can connect with Lorene. Have a fantastic week, everybody. And I will see you here back next week. And we'll be chatting more as we move out of April into May. Bye for now, everybody. You are most welcome, Lorene. Thank you so much. If you love this episode, I guarantee you're going to love exploring all the amazing opportunities that await us in reclaiming our awesomeness together. So come on over to my Facebook group, Women's Wellness Community for women wanting to rock their Me Now years. Or let's connect over on Instagram at Habit Guru 365 and make the Habit Guru podcast your healthy new habit.